right, good. See Bibles out. Lesson 85, the rule of a man named Abimelech. We're going to read from Judges chapter 9. So think of the end of Gideon's life, how he turned to loving wealth, having many wives, having made the ephod almost as something that the people could worship. So we have a lot of those issues there. And after Gideon comes his son. Verse 1 of chapter 9, it says, "And Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal," remember that's another name for Gideon, "went to Shechem unto his mother's brethren, and communed with them, and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, Speak, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem, whether is better for you, either that all the sons of Jerubbaal, which are 70 persons, reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. And his mother's brethren spake of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem all these words. And their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for he said, He is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-berith, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which followed him. And he went up unto his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren, the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons upon one stone. Notwithstanding yet Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Milo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. So keep your Bibles open there, because we'll continue on after that. So, if you remember, Gideon had 70 sons at the end of his life. Okay? He lived in that life of wealth. He had many concubines. He had a total of 70 sons. Abimelech is one of those. His name, I want to get this, his name means king. My father is king. So remember what Gideon said, I don't want to be king, God is your ruler. But he said that right after he had done the work of the Lord, and now all of a sudden, when he's living in wealth, he has all the power, comfortable life. Here he names one of his sons Abimelech, meaning my father is king. So his attitude must have changed. Now Abimelech, he takes up the place after his father dies, and it seems like he is very well liked by the men of Shechem. There must be something about his personality and who he is that the people of Shechem think he's a great man and they want him to be their ruler. God does not allow at this time, he's not made any man a king. He says no king, no ruler. But that doesn't matter to the men of Shechem. Now, Abimelech needs to keep his place, he thinks. He likes, just as we do, right? We like to be important. We like to have a place of maybe power where we can be in charge of something. Somebody puts us, hey, you be in charge of this group of students. Or at home, mom and dad leave you in charge. And do we sometimes allow that power or that privilege to go to our head? It does. And that's what Abimelech, that's what happened to him here. He allowed that power, he allowed that favoritism to go to his head. And then what he thinks of next is wicked and sinful. If he is one of 70 brothers, he's afraid that another one of his brothers will also want to have what he has, right? We do that. We see something, maybe a brother or sister has a birthday, And for it, they get a nice new sweatshirt. And we think to ourselves, now I would have liked that sweatshirt. Or we see someone else have an opportunity to go somewhere, maybe with mom or dad or grandpa or grandma, and we think, well, I would like to be able to have that. So we know of that same sin in our own selves, and that Abimelech knows there's a good chance his brothers are going to want what he has. So what does he do? He kills them all. Upon a stone there, he goes up to his father's house where his brethren, were they all there, or did he call them all in? The Bible doesn't tell us, but he takes all of them and kills them. That's a lot of killing. Think of that today. If one man killed 68 other men, he'd be considered probably one of the most heinous, wicked murderers in the history of our country. But that's what Abimelech does here. Now there's something else to understand too. God is working here. If you remember, toward the end of Gideon's life, he made that ephod, that outer garment that he could wear. He made it into a bit of idol worship. What kind of household did these sons grow up in? They grew up in a house not of one that served the Lord at the end, but of one that loved idol worship. And so that's God's judgment upon these wicked sons, because all of them we see are living in wickedness. Except we see one son escapes, one brother of Abimelech is spared. The youngest one, Jotham. Whether Abimelech spared him or he was able to do it all on his own, he gets away. He is not killed by his brother Abimelech. So the only two sons of Gideon still left are this Jotham and this Abimelech. God has punished in death the rest of these 68 sons. Okay? So now God is working here with Abimelech. Now we're focusing on Abimelech, but let's not forget that Abimelech is in all of the land of Israel. Gideon had delivered the people out of the Midianites, but meanwhile, what's going on in the land if you have a ruler like Gideon at the end of his life who's worshiping an ephod, who has many concubines, and now we have this wicked Abimelech setting an example. We know what's happening in the rest of the land too. They're beginning to fall back into their old ways. They're going off and they're bringing idols back into their homes that they can worship. They're marrying and giving in marriage their sons and daughters to the wicked heathen sons and daughters of the nations around them. So all of that is going on too. Jotham, though, here tells of a fable. Look at verse 7. We'll pick it up there. We'll read a few verses here. A fable that Jotham tells in Judges chapter 9. So follow along at verse 7. And when they told it to Jotham, he went and stood in the top of Mount Gerizim, and he lifted up his voice and cried and said unto them, Hearken unto me, ye men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you. The trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them. Over them. And they said unto the olive tree, Reign thou over us. But the olive tree said unto them, Should I leave my fatness, wherewith by me they honor God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? And the trees said to the fig tree, Come thou and reign over us. But the fig tree said unto them, Should I forsake my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then said the trees unto the vine, Come thou and reign over us. And the vine said unto them, Should I leave my wine, which cheereth God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then said all the trees unto the bramble, Come thou and reign over us. And the bramble said unto the trees, If in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. For therefore, if ye have done truly and sincerely in that ye have made Abimelech king, And if ye have dealt well with Jerubbabel in his house, and have done unto him according to the deserving of his hands. What's the meaning of that fable? We've got some different things in there. We see some trees. We see a fig tree and an olive tree. And there's a vine and there's a bramble. What are the meaning of them? Well, a fig tree, an olive tree, and a vine. What do they have in common? Think in your minds. What are some things those three things have in common? Well, they all produce edible fruit, something that we can eat. Figs, olives, grapes. Some of those things can be made into other things as well. The grapes here are referenced as to being made into wine. Olives being made into oils. So there is a reason that Jotham gives us. So God is using Jotham here, probably why God has spared him. Okay, so again, you can see God's hand in all of this. But Jotham is spared by God so that he can deliver this fable. And there he is, speaking of these things. Well, the vine and the olive trees and the fig trees are pictures of God's people. Those who produce and bear good fruit because the lifeblood of Christ flows through them. We saw that a few lessons ago with the vines being engrafted. The idea there is that they produce good fruits. These might be examples of maybe some of the good judges that we've seen so far. Othniel and Ehud, Jotham. But then there's the bramble. Bramble is nothing more than a weed. Something none of us would want. It's worthless. The best thing, in fact, that I would do with it is burn it. Right? If I had brambles in my yard, I'd pile them up, pour some gasoline on them, and light them on fire. Get rid of them. Burn them. That's why Jotham uses that here. The bramble is compared to Abimelech, Ephraim, because of the sin that they did. And would these trees, these fine fruit-bearing trees, olives trees, fig trees, and a grape-producing vine, would they want a bramble, a weed, to be greater than them, to produce more than them? The idea here in that fable is no, that would not make sense. And yet, here's what is happening in Israel. They're asking Abimelech to rule over them. Be our king. We want a king. So it seems like Abimelech and the men of Shechem are getting along. At least outwardly, that's how things appear. But we know how the devil works. The devil works today. We can look in the world, and although there are people who seem to be doing good things, or they tout the good things they're doing, we know really inside there's sin. There's evil. There's wickedness there. And that's what happens between Shechem and Abimelech. Two ungodly, an ungodly man and an ungodly group of men. Nothing good is going to come out of that. They're all going to fall apart. And so that's exactly what happens to the relationship here. Please look at verse 22. I'm going to read a few verses there just so we get the sense of what was going on here in Shechem between Abimelech and the men there. Verse 22. Follow along of chapter 9. And when Abimelech had reigned, there we see, he's a ruler, 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the cruelty done to the 70 sons of Jerubbabel might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech, their brother, which slew them, and upon the men of Shechem, which aided him in the killing of his brethren. And the men of Shechem set liers in wait for him on the top of the mountains, and they robbed all that came along by the way of them, and it was told Abimelech. And Gaal the son of Ebed came with his brethren and went over to Shechem. And the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. So a new man, Gaal. And they went out into their fields and gathered their vineyards and trode the grapes and made merry and went into the house of their God and did eat and drink and cursed Abimelech. And Gaal the son of Ebed said, Who is Abimelech and who is Shechem that we should serve him? Is not he the son of Jerubbaal and Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. For why should we serve him? And would to God this people were under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, Increase thine army and come out. And when Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled, and he sent messengers unto Abimelech privily, saying, Behold, Gaal the son of Ebed and his brethren be come to Shechem. Behold, they fortify the city against thee. Now therefore up by night, thou and thy people that is with thee, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be that in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, thou shalt rise early, and set upon the city. And behold, when he and the people that is with him come out against thee, then thou mayest do to them as thou shalt find occasion. We'll stop there. So there's a falling out, right, between men of Shechem and Abimelech. Two groups of sinners. They can't get along very long because they all want to do, as we read at the end of Judges, the last verse of Judges says, every man did what was right in his own eyes. They all wanted to do what was best for themselves, they thought. So what do? They have a falling apart. If you try to tell a lie to someone you know is a liar, a good liar, what you find out is because they're always lying, they're pretty good at sniffing out your lie. Someone who is a thief knows very well what things to look for so that no one steals from him. The same happens here with Abimelech and the men of Shechem. When dealing with a wicked, treacherous person who loves trickery, it's pretty hard to trick them. The men of Shechem decide they want to get rid of Abimelech. They want this man, Gaal, he wants to make himself the ruler. So he puts together a plan. Let's wait up outside the city along the main road, and when Abimelech comes along, we'll kill him. Well, here's the problem for Gaal and his men. They can't handle sitting there all day long waiting for Abimelech. Here comes a group of travelers. They rob them, steal from them, probably injure, murder, send them on their way. Here comes another group. Let's rob and steal from them. They can't handle it. They're so wicked that while they're lying in wait, they're robbing and stealing from the people. And so, of course, that word must make its way back to Abimelech. And Abimelech knows it's not safe to come, so he doesn't pass through that way. Gaal and his men are waiting. Meanwhile, back in the city of Shechem, the right-hand man of Abimelech, who's still there, hears the word of that, Zebul, and he sends word to Abimelech, by the way, watch out for this happening. In fact, Abimelech, why don't you go hide in the mountains? And when the sun comes up in the morning, why don't you come to the city and attack it? Meanwhile, Zebul, using trickery against Gaal and his men, invites them to come and wait by the gates of the city, a safe place. He confuses Gaal, makes Gaal think, we're on your side. We are your friends. And there he and his men wait. And then what happens? In the morning, as the sun comes up, Abimelech and his men come. And because the sun is bright and it's behind Abimelech and his men, it's not easy for Gaal and his men to make out that these aren't just travelers coming along the way. This is Abimelech and his men. And they don't have enough time to prepare themselves. By the time they recognize it's Abimelech and his men, they're trapped. and they are killed and destroyed by Abimelech and his army. Gael is destroyed. The men of Zebul, they come running out of the city too, and they destroy Gael and the men of Shechem. The city here, something is done to it as a result. Something that we read a few times in the Bible of what men did after they defeated a city and they didn't want anything there to grow in the city. Verse 45. You look there, and Abimelech fought against the city all that day, so the men of Shechem, and he took the city and slew the people that was therein, and beat down the city, and sowed it with salt. They took large amounts of salt and poured it into the fields and the land around there so that no produce could grow. There would be no more beautiful fig trees producing nice figs. There would be no more olive trees producing an abundance of olive. The grapes, or the vines, the grapevines would soon shrivel up and wither away because they can't survive in ground that is covered with salt. And so this city of Shechem here is wiped out and destroyed. Abimelech then goes to another city, and there he wants to do something too. But something happens to him. Let's see. Look at verse 52. And Abimelech came unto the tower, so this is in a new city, Thebez, and fought against it, and went hard unto the door of the tower to burn it with fire. And a certain woman cast a piece of a millstone upon Abimelech's head, and all to break his skull. Then he called hastily unto the young man his armor bearer, and said unto him, Draw thy sword and slay thee, that men may not say of me, A woman slew him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man unto his place. He's trying to break into a tower in the city. He wants it for himself. But God now, after using Abimelech to kill all of the sons of Gideon, the other sons, save Jotham, now he breaks through that door, and there's a woman there waiting for him. Huge millstones were used to grind the grain in these towers. She had only a piece or portion of the millstone. Maybe she was waiting up above in some type of balcony overlooking the doorway, so that when Abimelech thrust his way through, she dropped that large stone, and it crashed and hit him on the head, not killing him immediately, but probably crushing his skull enough that he was disoriented and that he knew he would surely now die. And he did not want the credit to go to this woman, that that's the way he died. So he turns to the young man with him, his armor bearer. I think of Saul or others done the same thing. He turns to him and says, Take your sword and thrust it through me, so that it's not said of Abimelech that a woman slew me. So the young man takes the sword, thrusts it through Abimelech, and Abimelech dies. God has now not only punished his other brothers, but he's now also taken the life of Abimelech, because God is in control. So we can see how God, in his infinite wisdom, directed every little thing that happened in the lesson. And we can also know that God is directing every little thing that happens in this world around us. Why are Christians in other maybe nations, we think of Syria or China, why are they being persecuted? India, for their faith. God is in control. He has his hand watching over that. Why does it seem like when we watch the politicians or the news, we see that sin seems to be increasing? Abortions, homosexuality, and everything else. Seems like the devil is winning, but he's not. God is in control, just as God was in control here. There will be judgment for the wicked. What's the warning for us is that we need to be careful that we're not tempted by the things of the world. That's really what the devil wants. He already has the wicked all in his hand. He wants to do anything possible to try to tempt us, to make us fall into sin, to bring shame to God's name. So he's successful here in our lesson today in making many of the men behave in that manner, in that way. We need to be careful that we don't fall into that same sin as well. So it's a good lesson to remember, okay? But to know too that God is in control of everything as well. I don't have any worksheets specifically for you guys. But I'll check in the next couple of days.